What if the most iconic moment in human history never happened the way we remember it? In 1969, the world watched as humanity took its first steps on another world. But what if those footsteps were never pressed into lunar dust at all? What if the images that united a generation were not captured on the moon? Tonight, we peel back the illusion and confront one of the most controversial questions of the modern age. We count down the top 10 moon landing conspiracy theories, the claims, coincidences, and contradictions that have fueled decades of doubt. Did we really leave Earth? Or was history's greatest achievement the most convincing performance ever staged? Number 1. The flag. On the surface of the moon, there is no atmosphere, no air, no wind, and no weather. Under these conditions, a flag should hang completely still once it is placed, because air is what makes flags ripple or wave on Earth. This is the heart of the conspiracy argument. If the moon is a silent, airless vacuum, why does the American flag appear to move in the Apollo 11 footage? The moon simply does not have the environmental conditions needed to create the familiar fluttering motion we all associate with wind. In a vacuum, objects behave very differently from how they do on Earth. Without air resistance, motion doesn't fade away. It lingers. When the astronauts twisted the pole into the lunar soil, they set the flag in motion. And with no atmosphere to slow it down, that movement continued for several seconds. NASA says this explains the apparent waving effect. But critics aren't convinced. They argue the motion looks less like simple vibration and more like fabric reacting to wind. On an airless world, natural flapping shouldn't be possible. Yet the footage shows a movement that many believe looks unmistakably like a breeze. Adding to the confusion is the design of NASA's flag itself. Because a normal flag would droop without wind, NASA equipped the Apollo flag with a horizontal crossbar at the top to keep it extended. However, on Apollo 11, this bar didn't fully extend, causing the fabric to wrinkle permanently. In photographs and video, these wrinkles look strikingly similar to ripples caused by wind. Combined with the astronauts handling the pole, this created the illusion that the flag was fluttering, even when, according to NASA, it was simply responding to physical contact. Number 2. There are no stars. One of the most frequently cited anomalies in the moon landing footage is the complete absence of stars in the sky. In virtually every photograph from Apollo 11, the sky behind the astronauts is a pitch-black void with no stars visible. For many skeptics, this detail stands out like a warning light. The moon has no atmosphere, meaning no haze, no clouds, and no distortion conditions that should make the stars shine with extraordinary clarity. Astronauts standing on the lunar surface should have been surrounded by a breathtaking backdrop of brilliant, unfiltered starlight. Yet in every photograph and every second of video released from Apollo 11, the sky is pitch black and empty, as if the universe simply vanished. Conspiracy theorists argue that the omission isn't a coincidence at all, but rather a limitation of filming on Earth. Recreating an accurate star field would have required detailed astronomical knowledge and precise placement of hundreds of lights, an extremely difficult and time-consuming task for a film crew in the 1960s. Leaving the backdrop blank would have been far easier than risking mistakes that astronomers could identify within minutes. To critics, the lack of stars is not a technical artifact, but a revealing oversight, a missing detail that hints at a staged production rather than a genuine leap onto an alien world. Number 3. Shadows. Another detail that has fueled decades of doubt lies within the shadows cast across the lunar surface. To conspiracy theorists, these shadows tell a story that contradicts the narrative of a single light source, the sun illuminating the moon. In several Apollo photographs, shadows appear to fall in different directions, diverging rather than running parallel as they should under direct sunlight. Some objects seem to be lit from the side, while others are illuminated from above, creating an uneven pattern that looks suspiciously like studio lighting rather than the product of natural conditions in space. Critics argue that this inconsistency suggests multiple artificial lights were used, just like a film set where lamps are placed at various angles to highlight subjects. They point out that the astronauts themselves seem almost perfectly lit, even when their backs should be facing the sun, as though a secondary light source, or even a large reflector, was positioned just out of frame. NASA attributes these irregular shadows to the moon's uneven terrain and the distortion caused by wide-angle camera lenses, but skeptics remain unconvinced. To them, the shadows don't lie. They hint at carefully staged scenes, not spontaneous moments captured on an alien surface. The question becomes impossible to ignore. If the lighting truly came from one distant sun, why do the shadows behave as though they were shaped by studio spotlights? Number 4, the mysterious rock marked with a C. Among the most intriguing and hotly debated pieces of so-called photographic evidence is the infamous C rock, a lunar stone that appears in an Apollo 16 photograph from 1972 with a perfectly shaped, unmistakably clear letter C printed on its surface. To those who doubt the moon landing, this single marking feels like a smoking gun, an accidental glimpse behind the curtain. In a world where film sets rely on labeled props, the notion that a rock might have been accidentally placed with its identifying mark facing the camera strikes conspiracy theorists as far too convenient to ignore. They argue that in a real lunar environment, shaped by billions of years of meteor impacts and harsh solar radiation, it would be extraordinarily unlikely for a rock to naturally acquire such a clean, symmetrical character. The mark seems deliberate, human-made, and oddly reminiscent of the kinds of labels used to organize scenery pieces in a studio production. NASA later claimed the C was nothing more than a stray hair or fiber that somehow landed on the photographic print during duplication. But this explanation has been met with widespread skepticism. If it was just a hair, why does the mark appear so perfectly formed? And how did such a contaminant manage to appear on a supposedly carefully handled image? To those suspicious of the moon landing narrative, the C rock is not just a curiosity. It is a potential crack in the facade, a moment where the illusion slipped and the truth briefly peeked through. Number 5, the technology gap. To skeptics, it seems unbelievable that NASA successfully completed a 238,000-mile journey with technology less advanced than a modern smartphone. How could they navigate space, land on the moon, broadcast live video, and return safely when today's space missions still face immense technical challenges? To them, the technology gap is not a footnote in history. It's a fundamental contradiction, raising the question, how did humanity leap so far ahead with such limited tools, only to seemingly step backward for decades afterward? The achievement feels to some not just improbable, but technologically inconsistent with reality. Number 6, the Van Allen radiation belts. Between Earth and the Moon lie the Van Allen belts, zones of intense energy particle radiation that surround the Earth like invisible deadly force fields. These belts were discovered in 1958, just over a decade before the Apollo missions. And early research warned that prolonged exposure could be extremely dangerous, even fatal, without heavy shielding. Yet the Apollo spacecraft, built with thin aluminum walls and limited protective materials, supposedly passed through these belts not once, but twice, on the way to the moon and again on the return trip. Skeptics argue that the shielding NASA used was nowhere near sufficient to protect astronauts from the levels of radiation present in the belts, especially given the speed and trajectory required to reach the moon within the narrow mission timelines. How the crew avoided acute radiation sickness, long-term cellular damage, or any noticeable effects at all? Many conspiracy supporters insist astronauts would not have survived this exposure without advanced shielding NASA simply did not possess in 1969. Therefore, the safest journey, they argue, was never taken at all. Number 7, Neil Armstrong's descent. Among the many curious details of the Apollo 11 mission is the shot of Neil Armstrong descending the ladder. This iconic shot was filmed from outside the lunar module, captured before any astronaut had stepped onto the lunar surface to operate a camera. The shot is clean, centered, and remarkably well composed, almost as if a professional cameraman were already waiting on the moon with tripod in hand. NASA's official explanation is that the footage came from a small remote-controlled camera mounted inside a storage compartment on the landing module. But conspiracy theorists find this unsatisfying. They question how, in an era when remote-controlled video equipment was rudimentary at best, NASA managed to produce footage that feels smooth, intentional, and almost cinematic. They point out that the camera appears to pan and adjust at just the right moments, tracking Armstrong's descent with suspicious precision. Some even argue that the lighting in the scene seems thoughtfully arranged, illuminating Armstrong from angles that would be difficult to achieve with the sun alone. In a time when television technology struggled with clarity and stability, the Apollo footage appears strikingly composed for something shot hundreds of thousands of miles away under unprecedented conditions. To skeptics, this iconic moment doesn't feel like an improvised capture from a remote lunar landscape. It feels rehearsed and expertly filmed, as though NASA wanted not just proof of a landing, but a dramatic opening shot worthy of history's greatest production. Number 8. Identical backgrounds. Another detail that continues to trouble conspiracy theorists is the claim of identical lunar backgrounds appearing in photographs supposedly taken miles apart. In several Apollo mission images, distant hills, crater rims, and horizon shapes appear strikingly similar, even though NASA states that the astronauts traveled to different locations during their excursions. To skeptics, this repetition is not merely a coincidence, but a potential sign of a painted or projected backdrop, the kind commonly used in large studio productions of the 1960s. They argue that the moon's landscape, though barren, is not uniform. Minute variations in slopes, rock formations, and crater distribution should create noticeably different horizon lines from place to place. Yet in these images, specific ridges and outlines match almost perfectly, suggesting a fixed scenery piece rather than a shifting environment. Critics also point out that the moon has no atmospheric haze, meaning distant objects should appear much sharper and more detailed than they do in the Apollo photos. The hazy, flattened look of the backgrounds, they claim, resembles the characteristics of painted matte backdrops used in traditional filmmaking, where depth is simulated rather than real. NASA explains the similarities by saying that the astronauts were not as far apart as some believe, and that the mountains on the moon are so large and distant that their appearance would change very little from different angles. But to conspiracy theorists, the recurring background shapes feel too consistent, too familiar, and too conveniently arranged, fueling the suspicion that the astronauts never moved across a lunar landscape at all, but instead performed within the boundaries of a carefully crafted set. Number 9. Lunar dust. One of the most visually striking and frequently cited anomalies in the Apollo footage is the surprising cleanliness of the lunar module's landing pads, despite the powerful descent engine that supposedly blasted the module onto the moon's surface. Conspiracists argue that the engine, which had enough thrust to slow a multi-ton spacecraft during its final descent, should have kicked up an enormous amount of fine lunar dust so light and abundant that astronauts later described it as behaving almost like powder. According to the official account, the engine was firing mere feet above the ground as the module settled. Yet when photographs were taken, the landing pads appeared largely untouched. No dust coating them, no accumulation in crevices, and no visible scorching or blast crater beneath the craft. For conspiracy theorists, this clean appearance defies the expectations of physics and common sense. They suggest that if the lander had genuinely descended under rocket power, the surrounding dust should have been violently displaced, leaving a hollowed-out imprint, or at least a fan-shaped pattern, radiating outward. Instead, the surface appears eerily smooth and undisturbed, as though the module had been gently placed there, rather than forcefully landed. NASA maintains that the moon's low gravity and the engine's throttled-down power minimize the disturbance. But critics claim this explanation doesn't align with the dust clouds visibly kicked up by astronauts' footsteps later on. To skeptics, the immaculate landing pads are not evidence of precision engineering. They are evidence of a controlled set environment, one where dust behaved conveniently rather than realistically. Number 10. The motive. Finally, the biggest conspiracy fact is motive. In the shadow of the Cold War, the race to the moon was more than scientific ambition. It was a battle for global dominance. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a struggle for power, prestige, and the hearts and minds of the world. To many people who doubt the moon landing, this extraordinary pressure created the perfect environment for deception. With the Soviets launching groundbreaking missions and the US falling behind in early space milestones, some believe NASA faced an unspoken ultimatum. Win at any cost. A televised moon landing would instantly secure American superiority, restore national pride, improve technological supremacy, all without the risks of an actual lunar mission. In this view, the Cold War wasn't just the backdrop. It was the driving force behind what conspiracy theorists consider the greatest performance ever staged. What many people find hardest to ignore is this: no human has set foot on the moon since 1972. More than half a century has passed. Computers now fit in our pockets, rockets land themselves, and technology has advanced beyond anything imagined during the Apollo era. We're told the reason is cost, that returning to the moon is simply too expensive. Yet the question lingers. If humanity once achieved this with 1960s technology at the height of the Cold War, why has no one gone back since? For some, the explanation makes sense. For others, the silence raises more questions than answers. Whether these clues point to a carefully guarded truth or simply feed into the human love of mystery, one thing is certain: the moon landing conspiracy refuses to fade. It continues to inspire questions, debate, and curiosity across generations. So what do you think? Were we witnessing humanity's greatest achievement or history's greatest illusion? We want to hear your thoughts. Do you believe the evidence points to a staged moon landing? Or do you think these clues can be explained another way? Drop your theories and questions in the comments below. Your perspective might just spark the next big discussion. And if you enjoyed exploring these hidden details and mind-bending possibilities with us, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another journey into the unexplained. Thanks for watching, Orbit Crew. We'll see you on the next mission.